This episode of The Game Biz is brought to you by Audible. For a free 30-day trial and to receive a free audiobook, just head on over to audible.com/gamebreaker. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Game Biz, episode 17 for January 28th, 2014. I'm Gary Gannon. You're watching the show right here on GameBreaker. Joining me, as always, Mr. Monty Sharma. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Gary.
Excellent, excellent. This is the show where you send in questions about the gaming industry, and Monty answers them. So if you want to send in a question to Monty for next week's show, send it to not submit. I always say submit. That's our other email. It's Monty@GameBreaker.tv. Monty@GameBreaker.tv is where you can contact them. So send in your questions. And we love video questions. We don't get enough video questions on this show. So record yourself over on YouTube. Keep it like 30 seconds to a minute. Send us the link and we will play it on the show. All right, first up this week from Josh Haygood. Says, hey, Monty and Gary, I work for a company specializing in contracting the online moderation for other companies. Do you think this type of work is a viable career path? Should I be trying to get on at one of the larger companies, or is there a living to be had working with a smaller company taking contracts? What types of jobs are out there besides simple entry-level work for moderators? What do you think?
Yeah, there's a few companies that do it. I mean, I'm thinking about things like Metaverse and Mod Squad, Sleepy Giant, those guys. And this is, I think it's a viable business because it's got two things that software developers don't like: a lot of staff and a lot of real estate. So, when you're running one of these operations, you need room for a whole bunch of people. You have to be able to staff it, 24/7. All those sorts of things is a fairly complex infrastructure. And so, anybody but the biggest is not going to be able to do that efficiently. Like if you want to do 24/7 support, you need kind of 12 people to really do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be a problem for all of the mid-sized guys and the small guys. So I think there's an opportunity there. The question becomes how much of it is technical support, which should reduce over time. I mean, it's gone down amazingly in the last several years. And how much of it is really community moderation. So I think the community moderation, long time for that. It should work well. It is all about making that customer feel good and have that, great experience every time they touch your brand, and having really solid moderators matters. Now, in terms of career path, sorry, get my Celtics logo in there.
With some single malt scotch to keep you warm.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of career path, you look at sort of moving up from being a mod to a team lead. You can go the path of somebody who works with the customer. So it's not just a thing of, all right, we're moderating for, such and such a game, but what's that game trying to do? What does their producer management team looking for? How do they want us to deal with things? What else can we do to make their lives better? All of those sorts of things is sort of a higher level of manager. And, from there, there's marketing, there's other things like that. And there's also moving sort of laterally into a different kind of company or a different game company from doing contract support. So it's viable, do a good job and everything will work out fine.
All right, next one. This one in from Roman. Interesting question. I'm curious to see how you're going to answer this one. Roman says, I'm a big fan of League of Legends, but I hate esports. I would rather play than watch. Do you think Riot cares?
Yeah. I think Riot does care because part of the part of the reason to do the esports is to drive the revenue that's coming from the players, right? So the player base is the reason they do all of this stuff. The esports gives you sort of this aspirational goal. So you're playing away um, on League, and you're doing well, but it's relatively arbitrary, and you don't have any sort of reality connection to your level in League. All of a sudden, you start seeing these people competing, winning, being
Like, hey,
rock
I can do
stars.
that as well.
So it leaves you with that feeling that maybe you've got a shot at doing that. It's that sort of feeling that you have, and so that drives you to play the game more. You play the game more, you pump in more money. Um, so I think at this stage right now, the goal is to focus on the game, and esports is a way to promote the game. Now, this will change at some point in time. Like if you look at the problems the NFL is having right now, where they're blacking out games, but it's not the real reason is that was an old model where they
Hmm.
wanted to fill the stands, and now filling the stands doesn't really matter. It's a small part of the take for that team. The vast majority of the revenue comes from broadcast rights. So when esports reaches the point where broadcast rights start to get into the, sort of level of sort of regular earnings or exceeds that by, an order of magnitude, then you'll see sort of the esports aspect of it becoming a little more dominant. And that'll be the change. But that means esports is bringing in $5 to $10 billion, which 10 years from now, um, 20 years from now, I don't know. They're going to have to make the games a little more interesting to watch.
All right, next up, this one is from Jason T. He says, a few friends and I have created a tabletop game, but we don't have enough money to have it made. Where can we get some help? Do you care about tabletop? Does anyone? I think people care
Yeah,
about tabletop still.
yeah, I think there's a bit of a resurgence in tabletop. The last couple of events I was at, there was several tabletop guys. They're sort of getting along. This is the problem of every sort of startup entrepreneur. And actually, I answered this question twice today. Um, the problem is this: to really do something right, you need money. You need real money. I mean, when we got our A round from the VCs, that
Hmm.
meant we went to 20 some staff. And that's what we needed to really do things reasonably for a company coming out the door. If you're two or three people and you're struggling, there's a whole lot of stuff you're not going to do. Now, the question I'd ask you is, do you have a way to eat and a place to sleep while you tough it out? Like, what's your runway? How much
These are
time?
important. These are important
Yeah, it's
questions.
a critical question, right? So if you've got, let's say 6 months that you have to work with, the sort of path to do it is to do it incrementally. So take whatever concept you have in the tabletop game and make a simple, relatively cheap version of it. So go to Kinko's, um, you know, do a lot of stuff by hand, package it in a plastic bag, take it out and play with people. And as you do that, people go, oh, hey, that's cool. All right, well, I'll buy one. I'll give you $10, I'll give you $20, whatever. You take that money, you put that aside to do a buy of better versions of this, and sort of as you're playing it, you're play testing it. So adjust the balance, make it more interesting, find out if the game gets sort of tiring after a while. Adjust all of those things. You go down the road. You have collected some money here. You spend that money on getting a more professional version of the game done. Still won't be like a full production run, so your cost per unit will probably be very high. Um, the metric generally is 4 times what it costs to make it is what you ought to sell it for. So sort of do that math, figure out all the other stuff, and use that run to hit a show that's local. There's all sorts of cons around. There's a ton of things for tabletop these days. Go and hit one of those and try and move some of these new units at a higher price. and get things rolling. You take the profit from that, you do a larger run. And your whole thing is you have to work out the math of how much do you have to sell to feed yourself, and all the employees and
Mm-hmm.
live. And you're on top of that, you sales and marketing costs, production costs, all of that sort of stuff. So when you do the math on that and you work it backwards, it'll tell you how many units of this game you need to sell. And if it's in the thousands of units, you probably are not going to make it. It's just really hard for somebody starting out to sell thousands of units. You might get to 100, you might get to a few hundred if it's a really good game. Um, the
You
alternate
think it's a
approach that
you think it's a misconception, like with people, like especially in the tabletop world, like trying to come in like this, is that they maybe think that like, well, we just need an injection of cash, and we're just going to go to somebody else to help us get this manufacturing done, and we're just going to make like a storage room full of units, and then somehow we're going to sell them. Where you're kind of saying like literally grassroots, like take your pieces of paper, then find somebody with a 3D printer who can help you like make pieces or something. Which actually I think is actually kind of a cool idea.
yeah,
You could do that. I mean, find, even if you can't afford to buy a 3D printer, find somebody who has one, and maybe you could outsource, making your first pieces or whatever with that. Um, and then just literally setting up a table at like a con or something, and just
yeah,
try and move 10 units, 15 units.
exactly. What people always miss is sort of the long-term math. So count the number of people it'll take to do this and multiply it by, geez, if we're doing a software startup, we'd say $10,000 a month per person is what it's going to cost you to be operational. And that covers, computers and rent and all that sort of stuff. Let's say you go something lower than that for tabletop. Maybe it's $5,000 a month or $6,000 a month. That's how many units you need to sell. And then if you're going to get a good price for buying a ton of units, where the hell are you going to put them? And how much effort is it to ship them around? So the alternate strategy is to go look for a distributor. And there are, companies that are distributors and publishers of tabletop games. And the names completely elude me right now, but ask around. Go to your local game store, ask them who the local distributors are. They'll point you at the right companies. But, take it to them, but don't go to them now and say, hey, me and a few buddies built this. Yeah, so, there's an endless line of those. Go to them and say, hey, we've built this, we've tested it for 6 months, we've been to all of these cons, we've sold this many units. This is why we think it's great, because these publishers have the relationships to get a production run done. They know how to distribute them. They know all of the stores and can get you shelf space. And all of that stuff is what it's going to take to succeed. Otherwise, enjoy it, play with your friends.
All right, next one up. This one up from Ribtick. Ribtick says, I saw something about Steam VR. Is Valve jumping on the Oculus bandwagon? We were just talking about the Oculus right before the show and pre-show. What's Steam doing here?
So from everybody I know who's worked with Oculus, it's really cool. Like, it's neat. You can build something really cool there. Nobody I know who's built anything on it actually thinks it's commercially viable. They all think, hey, that's neat. We did something really cool. Hey, play my, demo, and that's a whole lot of fun. But the problems for Oculus, part of it goes back to what we were just talking about, is that first run of devices that they do. How many are they going to be able to order? How much cash do they have on hand? And then do they have the distribution to sell tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of units? If they can do that, then they might be able to get the price point to something reasonable. I think it's a sub $200 price point it's going to take to get people interested in it. It might even be sub $100.
Wow.
And I don't think that's sort of technically possible right now, but I've seen 2 other companies who are trying to do variations on this. You can imagine at some point in time, NVIDIA, Logitech, Razer,
Like Sony's on board with something,
Yeah,
came out of CES, and
right.
wow,
All these,
wow. So what's funny is that your take on Oculus, and it's been like this for a while, is that you're pretty skeptical on it working. But apparently, I mean, they've why all the attention now to VR? Obviously, from all these other companies coming
yeah,
in, like from CES. Why is everybody jumping on the bandwagon? Do they all think something's there now? I mean, we've seen VR try to happen in
yeah,
the past. It's not like this is the first
right.
time. The Oculus is
No,
something new, but we've seen people do this. It's almost like 3D, how it came and went time and time again.
I,
Um,
let's go back to Second Life,
yeah.
right? Second Life, the hype over that was insane. And oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're going to live in this world. IBM's building things, all this stuff. I mean, I did a bunch of stuff around that with IBM, and then you sort of get to the point where you realize, you know what, this is cool for a small group of people. This is not ready for everybody in the world. So that small group of people, and that small group of people is generating somewhere close to $100 million in revenue. Um, but that small group of people is perfectly happy with what they have. It's going to be another generation. It's going to be something different. I think with Oculus, it's a question of, I don't think the hardware is quite good enough. It's not small enough. It's not light enough. You look too dorky wearing it. There is absolutely a dork element to it.
So that's what I'm confused
And
about the price point. Though. Don't you go the other way though? If they're not gonna move a lot of units, don't you sell this thing for like $1,000? Like, why don't you just like go the other way and just sell to like people who are completely have
right.
ridiculous amounts of disposable income? You sell a lot less units.
So do that. So you sell, let's say, instead of selling 100,000 units, you sell 10,000 units at 10 times the price. Which game developer wants to develop for it now?
Yeah, nobody.
Right.
That's true. That is true.
So you really nailed either way. But what I like about it, and Sony's effort and some of the other things you see, is every time people do something that's sort of leading edge, they pour a ton of money in it. Lots of investment goes in. Everybody thinks this is going to be the new hot thing. All of that drives down the cost of the components. The
Mm-hmm.
first round of companies tend to fail. They'll fail, and the next round, who's benefiting from that technology, let's go back to the dot-com boom. All these retail sites that, oh, we're going to retail this, we're going to retail that, all blew up. Why? Shopping carts was incredibly difficult to implement. Nobody figured out how the payments were going to work. Nobody had web infrastructure that was cheap enough to do all this stuff, right? We weren't running Linux servers. They were buying great big Sun boxes. So all of that investment that went into that big boom for the dot-com era all ended up making Amazon cheap enough to operate and making all these stores we go to now on the web possible. But you had to have that round of investment and failure. And I think, for head-mounted displays, we're going to go through that. I would suspect you're looking at something that's like a large pair of sunglasses. Not, doesn't go much past your face. It's going to be a lot lighter. Willing to bet some sort of wireless component to it. That's probably the device it's going to take to be successful, and probably a $200 price point, and maybe even less than that. I mean, think about, joysticks, right? You're old enough to play joystick games. How many people had decent joysticks? How many have the Thrustmaster?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to play Comanche and you don't have a collective switch, you're not going to be able to fly all that well.
Yep.
All these things have to come together, and so that's why I think that, hey, I wish them all the luck in the world. I hope it does work. I'm not going to bet on it.
You think somebody's just gonna buy them? You think somebody will come along and just purchase them?
Um, if they're doing protected, um, if they have protected IP, so if something about how they're doing it is difficult to do and patentable, then yeah, somebody probably will buy them. If they get to the point where it's a viable business, or you can see it being a viable business in 2 or 3 years, you might see somebody with deep pockets come in and buy them. So, Sony and Microsoft,
Mm-hmm.
somebody like that might step in and say, yeah, all right, we'll pick this up. Google's been doing some interesting buys around robotics, and they bought Nest. So the whole Internet of Everything kind of thing, they might be an outlier in terms of acquisition of somebody who's coming in and saying, okay, we want, you know, the whole sort of cyberspace interface kind of
Right.
thing. We want to give you this. We want to give you ways to move around it and navigate. Um, all that sort of stuff, maybe they pick it up because it'll be small money for what they have to spend. But the first generation, most likely to fail.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. I've been toying with picking up a dev kit just to play with it a bit and see how it kind of works.
You
And
can
there
put
was
it
an
next to
interesting.
your Ouya.
Yeah, exactly. That paperweight. How small they can make that unit is going to be interesting. They talked, I think, about that at CES actually, and they've said that the current generation prototype is extremely large with a lot of empty space, so they can easily go in there and put in components, remove components, and have wiggle
Mhm.
room to kind of develop that. They say, when it goes to manufacturing for consumers, that they're going to be able to make this thing a lot smaller than it currently is. Who knows how smaller? So. What do you think?
That'll
What
be
do you?
great.
I mean, how long? How long do you think it's going to take before that thing hits the market? That's the other thing I've been wondering.
Yeah, I think they've got to do a lot of work to make sure there's enough games that work with it.
Hmm.
Like, remember when I bought that Razer Hydra and I was griping about it for weeks?
Yeah, yeah.
It There was one game it worked with. I'm not going to pay $60 for a peripheral that works with one game. So they need a bunch of games that it works with, and they need a game that is, you have to have this to play it. It's the only way to really get that experience. So they need that sort of iconic game. If you think about the consoles, Gran Turismo, that was the sort of thing that, wow, that really made the PS2, PS3, stress, and you got that advantage. So they need a game like that to pull it off, and they need to have a fairly strong pipeline of content and content coming out so that the first wave of people, guys like you who run out and buy it, won't be complaining that I bought this thing and now it's gathering dust.
Need games,
It's
yeah.
got to move.
There's a bunch of them already. You can get Minecraft already. I think you can download that right now. So they've got Minecraft. I know DayZ's on board. I'm sure all the big companies have them internally. I'm sure they're playing World of Warcraft on
Yeah,
it right now. But
yeah, I'm sure.
we'll see. It's gonna be interesting. Monty Sharma, follow him on Twitter at Monster MONTSTER27. And like I said, if you have a question for Monty, submit your questions at monty@gamebreaker.tv. That is the email address you can email monty@gamebreaker.tv. You can follow me, Gary Gannon. Follow Gamebreaker TV at Gamebreaker TV. Check out our new show, This Week in Steam, with Kat Andrusko, brand new show, as well as Gamebreaker. Oh, and a new thing, we're doing reviews. Gamebreaker has just started doing video reviews. Our first review went up on the site last night for Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, so check that out. Very excited about pushing into the review territory. So we do the show live on Tuesdays at 3 Pacific, and we'll be back next week for some more Game Biz. Thanks for watching. See you next week.